What if I told you the potato sitting on your dinner plate and the tomato brightening your salad bowl are more than just kitchen companions? They are ancient cousins, separated by nearly 9 million years of evolution. This isn't a myth, and it's not a random theory. It's a discovery backed by fossil evidence, advanced genetic sequencing, and years of research into plant evolution. Imagine peeling back the layers of history to find that the potato's closest ancestor looked nothing like the soft, starchy vegetable we know today, and the tomato's earliest relative was far from the juicy red fruit that bursts with flavor in a summer salad. In the next few minutes, we will journey deep into the story of how scientists uncovered this astonishing connection, exploring the winding evolutionary path that links these two staple foods. Along the way, you will hear about controversial theories that challenge what we thought we knew about agriculture, and the surprising ways this knowledge could change the future of farming forever. By the end, you may never see your fries and ketchup in quite the same way again. Setting the stage, the Nightshade family. To understand how potatoes and tomatoes are connected, we need to begin with the botanical family, the Solanaceae. This is one of the most diverse and economically significant plant families in the world, encompassing more than 2,700 known species. Alongside potatoes and tomatoes, the Solanaceae family includes peppers, eggplants, and even tobacco, each sharing a distant genetic lineage that stretches back millions of years. You can find members of this family on almost every continent, thriving in environments as varied as high mountain slopes, tropical lowlands, and arid deserts. The economic importance of this family is staggering. Potatoes alone account for an estimated 376 million tons of global production each year, making them the fourth most important food crop in the world after rice, wheat, and corn. Tomatoes are not far behind, with an annual production of roughly 189 million tons, feeding populations across every continent and driving multi-billion-dollar agricultural industries. Beyond their commercial value, these plants are nutritional powerhouses, providing essential vitamins, minerals, and dietary fiber to billions of people daily. What unites this remarkable group is not just their economic impact but their shared biological traits. Many Solanaceae plants produce distinctive flowers with 5 fused petals, and most contain natural compounds called alkaloids. These alkaloids can be toxic in large amounts, a defense mechanism against herbivores, yet they have also been harnessed for medicinal purposes. Their seeds are typically enclosed within fruit, whether in the fleshy body of a tomato or the small berries found in certain wild potato species. Humans have interacted with these plants for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests that potatoes were first domesticated in the high Andes of South America at least 7,000 years ago, while tomatoes trace their domestication to Mesoamerica, particularly in the region that is now Mexico, around 2,000 years ago. These domestication events shaped the plants into the forms we recognize today, but they did not erase the deeper genetic blueprint that connects them. That blueprint is the key to understanding how these two seemingly different crops share a common ancestor, and how the trail of evidence leads us back to a 9-million-year-old divergence that would forever shape human diets. The 9-million-year-old secret. The revelation that potatoes and tomatoes share a common ancestor is not the result of a single groundbreaking moment, but rather the culmination of decades of careful research. Scientists began to suspect a deeper link between these crops when early genetic studies revealed that their DNA was astonishingly similar. As sequencing technology advanced, molecular biologists were able to compare large sections of both genomes, mapping out the intricate similarities that tied them together. This research led to the concept of a molecular clock, a tool that estimates the time of evolutionary divergence based on the rate of genetic mutations. Using this method, scientists calculated that potatoes and tomatoes branched off from a shared ancestor approximately 9 million years ago. But genetics alone wasn't enough. Fossil evidence began to support the timeline, with ancient plant remains from South America showing features that hinted at an intermediate species. These fossils, found in the Andes and preserved in sediment layers dating back millions of years, carried traits that could belong to either modern plant. The combination of DNA sequencing and paleobotanical findings gave researchers confidence in the 9-million-year figure, painting a compelling picture of the split. Research teams from leading institutions, including the University of California, Davis, and the International Potato Center in Lima, Peru, played critical roles in this discovery. By sampling hundreds of potato and tomato varieties from around the globe, they were able to identify key genetic markers, unique sequences in the DNA that serve as evolutionary timestamps. These markers aligned with patterns of geological change in South America, where shifting mountain ranges and changing climates created new environments for plants to adapt to or perish. Ancient maps of South America help bring this story to life. Long before the modern continent took its present shape, much of the region was dominated by vast forests and rising mountains. In what is now Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador, the ancestor of potatoes and tomatoes likely thrived, rooted in fertile soils enriched by volcanic activity. Over time, tectonic shifts and climatic cycles forced these plants into new habitats, and in adapting to those environments, they began to change, not just in appearance but in fundamental structure and function. That gradual divergence, set in motion millions of years ago, would ultimately give the world two of its most important and beloved crops. The common ancestor. If we could step back 9 million years to see the plant that gave rise to both potatoes and tomatoes, we would likely be struck by how unfamiliar it seemed. It would not resemble a plump tomato or a starchy potato, but rather something in between, perhaps a sprawling vine with small, tough leaves and modest flowers. Its fruits would have been small, likely no larger than berries, and bitter to the taste. This bitterness was not a flaw, but a survival strategy. Many plants in the Nightshade family produce bitter alkaloids to deter herbivores, ensuring that seeds survive to the next generation. Beneath the soil, the ancestor might have developed swollen, tuber-like roots, but not the fully formed, energy-rich potatoes we know today. These primitive storage organs could have given the plant an advantage during periods of drought or nutrient scarcity, allowing it to persist when other vegetation withered away. Above ground, the modest fruits would have been adapted for seed dispersal by specific animals or environmental conditions, though likely not in the way modern tomatoes lure in humans and wildlife with their juicy sweetness. The ecological pressures driving diversification were immense. As the Andes continued to rise, new microclimates emerged, separating plant populations by altitude and weather conditions. In the cooler, higher elevations, plants with more substantial underground storage organs had the upper hand, eventually leading toward the evolution of the potato. Meanwhile, in warmer, lower regions, plants that produced larger, more appealing fruits gained an advantage in seed dispersal, setting the stage for the tomato's development. Pollinator behavior also played a role. Changes in insect populations, driven by shifting climates and the availability of flowers, may have influenced the shape, color, and scent of blooms, further guiding the evolutionary path of these plants. The process was not quick. It unfolded over millions of years, with countless intermediate forms existing between the ancestor and the crops we recognize today. We can still catch glimpses of this shared heritage in modern wild relatives found in Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. Some wild potato species bear small, berry-like fruits, while certain wild tomatoes grow closer to the ground and show tuber-like swelling in their roots. These plants act as living windows into the past, preserving traits that have long since disappeared from domesticated varieties. They are also vital resources for modern science, as their genetic diversity offers clues for breeding more resilient crops in the face of climate change. Evolutionary split. From one plant to two icons, the great divide between the potato and the tomato began as a story of geography and climate. As the Andes Mountains rose higher, they created distinct ecological zones, separating plant populations in ways that would shape their future. In the cooler, wind-swept highlands, the ancestral plant populations adapted to thin air, intense sunlight, and cold nights. Here, survival favored those with the ability to store energy underground, leading to the gradual development of tubers, compact, nutrient-rich storage organs that could endure harsh seasons. Over millions of years, these highland plants evolved into what we now recognize as the potato, perfectly adapted to the demanding environment of the Andes. In contrast, the lower altitude valleys and coastal plains offered warmer temperatures, richer soils, and more stable growing conditions. In these environments, the plant populations shifted their strategy. Rather than investing energy into underground storage, they began producing larger, juicier fruits to attract animals for seed dispersal. Bright colors and appealing scents became evolutionary advantages, drawing in birds and mammals that spread seeds across vast distances. These adaptations marked the beginning of the tomato lineage, a plant designed to thrive in fertile lowlands and tropical regions. This split was not an overnight transformation, but rather a gradual divergence that happened over millions of years, with each lineage refining traits to suit its specific environment. The potato's starchy tubers allowed it to become a reliable food source in the mountains, while the tomato's fleshy fruits became a valuable resource for the wildlife, and eventually the humans, of the lowlands. Human intervention accelerated this divergence in ways nature never could. Early Andean farmers, recognizing the potato's resilience and caloric value, began cultivating and selectively breeding varieties with larger tubers, better taste, and improved storage life. Archaeological digs in southern Peru and northwestern Bolivia have unearthed ancient potato remains dating back more than 7,000 years, evidence of some of the earliest agricultural practices in the Americas. Similarly, in Mesoamerica, early farmers worked with wild tomatoes, selecting for size, sweetness, and reduced bitterness. Seeds found at archaeological sites in Mexico suggest domestication began at least 2,000 years ago, leading to the plump, flavorful fruits that became a cornerstone of cuisines worldwide. By the time these crops spread beyond the Americas, potatoes to Europe in the late 16th century and tomatoes shortly after, they had become distinct icons, each with its own place in agriculture, culture, and cuisine. Yet beneath their differences, the genetic link remained, a reminder of their shared origin in a single ancestral plant millions of years ago. Controversies and debates. While the genetic and fossil evidence strongly supports the idea that potatoes and tomatoes diverged around 9 million years ago, the scientific community is far from unanimous on every detail. One of the primary debates centers on whether there was truly a single common ancestor or whether both crops descended from a cluster of closely related species that evolved side by side. Some researchers argue that the genetic similarities could be the result of hybridization events rather than a single, linear evolutionary split. Another point of contention is the exact timing of divergence. While molecular clock studies suggest a 9 million year separation, some fossil interpretations point to a much earlier timeline. Discrepancies arise because plant fossils are notoriously difficult to interpret. Many soft tissues do not fossilize well, and the preserved parts may belong to extinct relatives that resemble modern species but are not direct ancestors. This makes reconstructing an exact evolutionary pathway challenging, especially in regions where geological activity has altered or destroyed ancient deposits. There is also debate over the role of environmental events in shaping these crops. Did the Andes uplift directly cause the split, or were climatic cycles such as ice ages and shifts in rainfall more influential? And to what extent did natural hybridization blur the genetic lines between early potato and tomato populations? Hybridization is a particularly tricky factor. Even today, certain wild species of potato and tomato can interbreed under the right conditions, producing hybrids with traits from both parents. This genetic mixing could have occurred multiple times over millions of years, complicating the story of a clean evolutionary break. These uncertainties do not diminish the importance of the genetic connection between potatoes and tomatoes, but they do highlight the complexity of plant evolution and the need for continued research. In many ways, the debates themselves are a testament to how rich and intricate this shared history truly is. Modern genetic proof. In the last decade, breakthroughs in genome sequencing have taken the connection between potatoes and tomatoes from intriguing theory to undeniable proof. Scientists now have complete genetic maps of both crops, allowing them to compare the DNA with extraordinary precision. What they found is remarkable. Over 92% of the genes in a potato are also found in a tomato. This genetic overlap explains their similar flower structures, shared chemical defenses, and certain growth patterns. Using this data, researchers have gone a step further, experimenting with CRISPR gene editing technology to swap traits between the two species. In controlled laboratory settings, scientists have introduced disease-resistant genes from wild tomatoes into potato plants, making them more resilient against blight and pests. Conversely, certain potato genes that improve cold tolerance have been tested in tomato varieties, allowing them to thrive in cooler climates. The possibilities for the future are staggering. With advanced bioengineering, it is conceivable that we could create hybrid plants that combine the high yield and storage qualities of potatoes with the nutrient-rich, flavor-packed qualities of tomatoes. While such hybrids may never reach supermarket shelves due to regulatory and consumer acceptance challenges, the genetic tools developed through this research are already revolutionizing crop science. This modern genetic proof not only confirms their shared ancestry but also opens the door to agricultural innovations that could change the way we grow food forever. Why it matters today. Understanding the shared evolutionary history of potatoes and tomatoes has direct and urgent applications in modern agriculture. One of the most significant benefits is in breeding crops for disease resistance. The Irish potato famine of the 1840s, caused by a devastating blight, killed over 1 million people and drove massive migration. Today, by incorporating disease-resistant genes from tomatoes into potatoes, scientists hope to prevent similar disasters. Climate change adds another layer of urgency. Potatoes are a staple food for more than 1 billion people worldwide, but rising temperatures, erratic rainfall, and shifting seasons threaten yields. The genetic toolkit of the tomato, adapted for warmer, sometimes harsher environments, offers a valuable resource for making potatoes more resilient. Food security depends on genetic diversity, and the evolutionary story connecting these crops expands the options available to breeders. By tapping into the broader Solanaceae gene pool, researchers can enhance nutritional content, improve yields, and ensure that crops withstand the challenges of the future. This is not just about preserving agricultural history, it's about preparing for a future where global demand for food continues to grow. The potato and tomato may have diverged millions of years ago, but today, their shared genetic legacy could help feed the world. Fun and unexpected facts for all their importance today, potatoes and tomatoes both had rocky introductions to human diets. When potatoes first arrived in Europe in the late 16th century, many believed they were poisonous because of their resemblance to other toxic nightshades. Tomatoes, too, were treated with suspicion, nicknamed love apples, and rumored to be dangerous or even aphrodisiacs. It took centuries before these foods became trusted staples. Their journeys have now reached beyond Earth itself. NASA has grown both potatoes and tomatoes aboard the International Space Station as part of research into sustainable space agriculture. These experiments aim to find crops that can feed astronauts during long-term missions, and both plants' adaptability makes them ideal candidates. The diversity of these crops is staggering. There are over 4,000 known varieties of potatoes and more than 10,000 varieties of tomatoes, each with unique shapes, colors, and flavors. This variety is more than culinary. It is a living archive of traits that could be vital to future breeding programs. So next time you dip a crispy fry into a pool of ketchup, consider this: you are reuniting two distant cousins, separated by millions of years yet bound by a shared history. If that changes the way you see your plate, let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from the world of science and nature.